Cities bombed, families torn apart, children orphaned. What if I told you that the wars we see today, conflicts in Israel, Palestine, and Iraq, are not just about land or politics? The world fights over borders, power, and religion, unaware of the unseen battle shaping it all. Beneath every headline, every battle, every act of hatred, a far deeper war is at play. A war not waged with guns or bombs, but for souls. To understand the times we are living in, we must go back to where it all began. To a people God first called his own. To a promise that shaped history, and to a deception that has fueled centuries of war, suffering, and misunderstanding. Because what started then still shapes the world today. Let's take this journey together. Let's go back to the beginning. To understand why the Jewish people have been at the center of history's greatest conflicts, we must go back to Abraham. Over 4,000 years ago, God made a covenant with him. I will make you into a great nation, and through you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Genesis 12:2-3. This nation became Israel, the Jewish people. They were chosen not for their greatness, but to reveal God's law, truth, and plan for salvation. God gave Israel his law, sent prophets, and promised a Messiah, a Savior. For centuries, the Jewish people waited, longing for their Messiah. But what happens when expectation doesn't match reality? When Jesus came, many recognized him. Many followed. But the religious leaders expected a different kind of king, a political leader to overthrow Rome and restore Israel's power. But Jesus came for something greater, to conquer sin, not nations. This misunderstanding would alter history forever, leading to the moment that divided the world, the crucifixion. The crucifixion was the most pivotal moment in human history. The day the Son of God was betrayed, falsely accused, and sentenced to die. But who was truly responsible for Jesus' death? For centuries, the Jewish people have been blamed. But is that what the Bible actually teaches? The religious leaders, the Pharisees and Sadducees, saw Jesus as a threat. He exposed their hypocrisy, challenged their authority, and drew massive crowds. He healed the sick, forgave sins, and claimed to be one with God. They conspired to have Jesus arrested, but under Roman rule they had no power to execute him. Only Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, could authorize the death penalty. At first, Pilate found no guilt in Jesus. Pilate tried to release Jesus, even offering the crowd a choice, Jesus or Barabbas, a known criminal. But stirred up by the religious leaders, the crowd demanded Barabbas. Pilate gave in. With a single command, Jesus was sentenced to death. Roman soldiers carried it out, beating him, mocking him, and nailing him to a cross. So who was responsible? A small group of religious leaders conspired. Pilate gave the order. Roman soldiers carried it out. But ultimately Jesus made the choice. Jesus' death was no accident. It was part of God's plan to redeem the world. He willingly gave his life so that anyone, Jew or Gentile, could be saved. Yet history took a tragic turn. Instead of recognizing the personal responsibility of those directly involved, many wrongly blamed the entire Jewish people, leading to persecution, violence, and some of history's greatest injustices. The Bible is clear. People are responsible for their own sins. The Jewish people today should not be blamed for what happened 2,000 years ago, because the real enemy was never the Jews. It wasn't the Romans. It was something far more sinister. The wrongful blame placed on the Jewish people didn't end with Jesus' crucifixion. Instead, it fueled centuries of persecution, leading to some of history's darkest moments. In 70 AD, just decades after Jesus' death and resurrection, the Roman army under Emperor Titus laid siege to Jerusalem. The Jewish temple was destroyed, hundreds of thousands were killed, and the survivors were scattered across the world. This event, known as the Jewish diaspora, forced the Jewish people into exile, making them foreigners in lands where they were often unwelcome. As Christianity spread through Europe, so did a dangerous lie that the Jews were Christ killers. This led to centuries of discrimination, forced conversions, and even massacres. During the Middle Ages, Jews were forced into separate quarters known as ghettos. They were blamed for plagues, economic crises, and even natural disasters. Entire communities were expelled from England, France, and Spain. In 1492, the same year Columbus set sail, Spain issued the Edict of Expulsion, forcing all Jews to either convert to Christianity or leave. Many who refused were tortured or killed during the Spanish Inquisition. Persecution continued for centuries. False accusations, known as blood libels, claimed Jews kidnapped Christian children for rituals, sparking violent riots, known as pogroms, where entire Jewish communities were slaughtered. In Russia and Eastern Europe, these attacks became widespread. Homes burned, businesses destroyed, families torn apart, all because of a lie. But the darkest chapter came in the 20th century, under the Nazi regime. During World War II, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party orchestrated one of history's greatest atrocities, the Holocaust. Over 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were hunted, starved, tortured, and murdered. Families ripped apart. Generations wiped out. In the gas chambers of Auschwitz, the ghettos of Warsaw, and the death marches across Europe, a demonic plan sought to erase the Jewish people, the very people through whom God had given his promises. This was more than a political agenda. It was a satanic attempt to wipe out God's chosen people, rooted in the same deception that began nearly 2,000 years ago. For nearly 2 millennia, the Jewish people wandered, homeless, persecuted, and rejected. But then, in the wake of history's darkest hour, something happened. Something the world never expected. Something foretold in ancient prophecies, and it would change everything.